so desire to go. Now this is going to be a different sermon this morning. We are going to be in Psalm chapter 2. But that is going to be our key verse, but we're actually going to be talking about the book of Esther primarily this morning. Now, the book of Esther is 10 chapters long, a couple hundred verses, and so I'm not going to read all of those. Aren't you all happy? You don't have to pull out your pillows yet, okay? But we will be going through the story of Esther, but I'll just be telling the story as opposed to reading it to you. So if you'd like to turn in your Bibles to Psalm chapter 2, you are welcome to do so. It's hard as we look around at the world in which we live and our lives and not get worried about what's taking place. It's pretty hard, almost I'd say impossible, to watch any amount of news from any organization and leave it feeling encouraged, especially in today's time. We look at our lives and the things that take place and how Satan would thwart and disturb us and break us. And it's hard not to get worried and downtrodden. But this morning I would like us to realign our vision of the world in which we live and the lives that we live to something that's a little more correct with actually what's going on. Psalm chapter 2, God looks back and it says that he laughs on the plans of men and Satan. Psalm chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Why do the nations rage, and why do people plot in the vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and his anointed, saying, Let us break their bonds in pieces, and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall hold them in derision, and he shall speak to them in his wrath, and distress them in his deep displeasure." Verse 6 says, "Yet I have set my king on the holy hill of Zion." The title of my sermon this morning is "God Has a Sense of Humor." And his sense of humor is in dramatic fashion in different ways, but one of them that is mentioned here in the Psalms is that he sees the plans of the rulers of this world, and he sees the plans of Satan, and laughs at their foolishness. Laughs that they think that they can thwart his plans. So I'd like to take you to a story in the book of Esther in the Old Testament. And I want you to notice as we go through this rather quickly, I want you to be reminded of this quote, that coincidence is God working undercover. We often talk about coincidences in our life, and we say, "Oh, wasn't that neat? Oh, I can't believe it worked out that way. Aren't I lucky?" When really, we're just taking the glory from God, because it's God working behind the scenes. He's working undercover, and you might just miss it. The book of Esther is that same way. And I'd like you to notice the times when you find coincidences as we go through. Esther chapter 1, the Queen Vashti is ordered by the king Ahasuerus to show herself in a party for all of his royalty. She refuses to perform in such a dramatic fashion, and she's deposed. I'll say it correctly. She's deposed. The king says, "We can't have this happening in our kingdom because we're going to have a revolt of the women." And so they kick her out as queen. Well, the king's upset, and now he's without a queen because he's kicked her to the curb. And so he decides to have a beauty pageant in chapter 2. In the beauty pageant, there's this little girl named Esther who's an orphan. By chance, by coincidence, she is taken in by a man named Mordecai, who is her first cousin. and he raises her like his own daughter. She doesn't want to be in the beauty pageant. She doesn't want to become queen, if possible. But he says, it's kind of important that you're here. Well, she joins the beauty pageant, not by will, but by force. And she wins. Don't you think it's a wonderful coincidence that God can use beautiful people too? I don't know why he can use us ugly ones, but he can use the beautiful ones too. And he did with Queen Esther. She wins the beauty pageant. In the process of winning the beauty pageant, by coincidence, this man named Mordecai, her cousin, he works as a guard at the king's gate. And he overhears the plot of two of the eunuchs that the king has to assassinate the king. Well, Mordecai, his first thought is to protect the king. That's his job. So he tells the story to his cousin, who is now queen, who reports the story to the king. And the assassination plot has been forwarded. Chapter 3, the king promotes a man named Haman the Agagite to be higher than any other prince in the land, second in command only to him. But in his pride, he wants all to bow before him as if he was the king. One day he's leaving the gates of the city, and who should he meet but this man, this Jew named Mordecai? But Mordecai will bow to no one except for his God and his king. And Haman takes offense to that. Haman is so enraged that one would stand while all others should bow that he wants to kill Mordecai. But he's not just satisfied to kill Mordecai, he wants to kill and genocide his entire race of people, the Jews. But there's a little background that you need to know about why he wants to genocide the Jews. It's not just because he's an arrogant man. It's not just because he wants revenge over and above, over the top, as it were. The story would actually go back 1,000 years before this time. Esther's story takes place about 450 BC. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 17, verse 8, back to 1450 BC, 1,000 years before this. The children of Israel have just crossed the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army are destroyed behind them. They come in, they're thirsty. God tells Moses to strike the rock. He strikes the rock, water comes out. Immediately after that, they are encamped in Rephidim. And Amalek, a race of giants from Canaan, come to raid the armyless Jewish people. They're slaves. They're not prepared to face an army, much less an army of giants. And Amalek comes to completely wipe them out. Well, you know the story. Moses goes up on the hillside and he raises his hand, and as long as he has his raised hands holding up the Lord's banner, they win the battle. But as he begins to drop his hands from being tired, they begin to lose. So Joshua comes up and he's holding him up, and, well, they win the battle. Exodus chapter 17, verse 15 and 16. And Moses built an altar, and its name was called, "The Lord is my banner," Jehovah Nissi. For he said, because the Lord has shown, the Lord will have a war with Amalek from generation to generation. So 1,000 years before this, in Rephidim, this tribe of people, these Amalek giants, come to kill and wipe out the Jews. Now we need to fast forward 550 years to around 1000 BC. 1 Samuel chapter 15, Samuel the prophet comes to King Saul, Israel's first king, and says, "The Lord has sent me to anoint you king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore heed the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what they did to Israel 550 years before when they ambushed them coming out of Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep and camel and donkey. Why then do you not, So they go on to the battle, and what does Saul decide to do? He keeps the best of the animals, and he keeps the king of Amalek. I want you to notice something here. Verse 19, Samuel comes back after the battle and says, Saul, why did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you stoop down on the spoil, and do evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, but I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and gone on a mission on which the Lord has sent me, and brought back Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. First of all, did Saul utterly destroy Amalek? No. For one, their king's still sticking around. But notice, what is his name? His name is Agag. Now, I had it before you, but if you go back, if you're out in the parking lot, if you go back to Esther chapter 3, verse 1, it says that the king Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. This man, Haman, was a forerunner because Saul didn't do what he was supposed to. The book of Esther would have never existed if Saul would have obeyed God and wiped out this people that were vengeful, wanting to destroy the Jews. But because Saul didn't, 550 years later, they're back doing this all over again. And this time, Haman has enough power as second in the largest country in the world to destroy and genocide the entire Jewish tribe all over the world. Our decisions, especially when we are disobedient, have lasting impact that we can have no understanding of. We reap rewards when we are disobedient. We may not see it right now, but there will be punishment when we disobey. And whether Saul saw it or not, in his disobedience, yes, he lost the kingdom to David. But further than that, he put his entire race of people in danger. So let's go back to Esther chapter 2, verse 5, because there's something more that you might not realize that's going on behind the scenes. Chapter 2, verse 5 and 6, in Shushan, which is also Susa of Iran, that you can go to today. The citadel was there, and a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Now, if you remember the story of Saul, Saul was a Benjamite. In fact, he was the son of Kish. This man, Mordecai, Shimei, was his grandfather. So now let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 16. We talked about it briefly Wednesday night. When David came to Barum, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera, coming from there. He came out cursing continuously as he came. Verse 9, as he's cursing them, David's crossing the Kidron Valley. The son of Shimei, who Saul said, oh, you deserve it because how you treated my family, and that we should be king and you shouldn't. God's getting after you. And Abishai says, you want me to just go cut this guy's head off? Verse 9 and verse 10, the king said, what do I have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? Verse 11, and David said to Abishai and all of the servants, see how my son who came from my own body seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite? Let him alone and let him curse, so that the Lord has ordered him. Where Saul failed to obey God, David, in one of his greatest times of need, running from his son Absalom, shows mercy on a guy that's cursing his name. He shows mercy to him. That man has a son, and his son is Mordecai. What a coincidence that Mordecai would be spared because of David's obedience. What a coincidence that Mordecai would be standing at the king's gate in Persia, 500 miles away, to save the king and ultimately his entire tribe. Just as bad as Saul's disobedience brings repercussions, so does our obedience. We may not see it in the short term, but there is always long-term reward, eternal reward for us being obedient. So let's continue on with Esther's story. As we said, Esther chapter 3, the king promotes Haman. Chapter 4, Mordecai learns of the plot that Haman wants to destroy and genocide all the Jews. So he convinces Esther to risk her life before the king, and she asks them to fast for 3 days. They'll feast for 3 days later. Esther chapter 5, after the fasting period, the queen risks her life, and she entreats the king and Haman to a feast. After the feast, king's willing to do pretty much anything for her, and she says, no, I want you to show up to another meal. She chickens out. She can't say it that first time. So, in between the first and the second feast, Haman's furious that Mordecai is still alive. And under his wife's encouragement, he sets up a gallows in which he can kill Mordecai. The night in between the first and the second feast, chapter 6, the king gets indigestion. Well, maybe. He got something and he couldn't sleep. And so while he's trying to go to sleep, he does what any other person would do. Let's go get the books and let's fall asleep just bored. And so they start reading, and they come across the passage in time where Mordecai had saved the king's life from the plot, and just by coincidence, they hadn't done anything to honor him. The king says, well, wait a minute, we got to honor this guy. We got to know that if someone saves the king's life, this is a big deal. So the next morning, the morning before the second feast, king says, hey, Haman, you're the second in command. I want your advice. What should I do with the guy that I think that the whole nation should honor? That I'm happy with? Well, obviously, his arrogance, he thinks, well, it's got to be me. I'm the best in the kingdom. So he says, put him on royal robes, put him on the king's horse, and parade him around town. Have somebody declare that this is what happens when someone is blessed by the king. And the king, Ahasuerus, says, immediately go do that for Mordecai. Oh, what a coincidence, right? Coincidence is God working undercover. Now, can you imagine? Haman, in all of his arrogance, wanting Mordecai to bow to him, now has to walk in front of his horse, proclaiming this is what takes place when someone loves the king. Good luck trying to kill that man now. That plot's going to go down quick. So he goes home crying to his wife. And she says, well, dude, you're in trouble. There's nothing that we can do for you. You picked the wrong guy to be mad at. By this time, unfortunately, though, for Haman, the law has already been written that the Jews would be destroyed. And in Persia, once you write a law down, it can't be reversed. So things are already set in motion that can't be stopped. That night, that afternoon, Esther chapter 7, they have the banquet. The king is so pleased that he offers Esther this time anything in his kingdom up to second in command, literally taking Haman's place. I will give you anything you want, and all she asks for is for her life to be spared and the life of her people. Needless to say, this was news to the king, and he wasn't very pleased. So the king said, well, who's going to do this? And she looks over and says, that guy, Haman. The king's enraged. In a fit, ballistic, he leaves the room to calm down to go into the garden. In the process of him leaving, Haman realizes the writing's on the wall, as it were, and he comes just begging the queen, grabbing at the shirt tails or the bottom of her dress. In the process of this, just by coincidence, he trips and falls on the bed before her as the king's coming back in the room. And the king sees it and gets a total misunderstanding about what's taking place. And Haman is put on the the gallows that were meant for Mordecai that very moment. A lot of coincidences going on, don't you think? Chapter 8, the king gives Esther all that Haman owned. And she pleads that the law that was written would be stopped. And he said, I cannot stop it. But what I can do, I'll give you a piece of paper and you can put anything you want on that paper that your family can defend themselves. So she writes, get this, a Jew in Persia, a woman writes a law that will literally go around the Persian world from India to Ethiopia. And the king says, put on it whatever you want. So what she says was, when they come to attack us, we are allowed to defend ourselves, and all of the governments inside of Persia are required to help us defend ourselves with whatever is needed. So the day comes, Esther chapter 9, and the Jews defend themselves all around the Persian Empire. 500 just inside of Susa, inside the capital, were killed that day, including all 10 of Haman's sons. Now this is all coming up to verse 11, verse 12. And the king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan or Susa, the citadel, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you, or what is your further request that shall be done? If that wasn't good enough, what else you want, honey? Wise man, right? Then Esther said, if it please the king, let it be granted that the Jews who are in Shushan do it again tomorrow, to decree and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Now, I want you to notice what happened in verse 11. Verse 11, they killed 500 people, including the 10 sons of Haman. King says, what do you want to do? Let's do it again, sir. And this time, I want you to hang Haman's 10 sons. They're already dead. What do they call that? The women that, the spite of a woman, however that goes? Ooh, it would have been bad. Don't make that lady mad. She says, I know they're dead. Kill them again. Now this is more than what you're reading, but it takes place and those boys they're hung. God takes what Satan made to destroy the Jews and in fact raise them to great power. So high that in chapter 9 and chapter 10, they put Mordecai as the second in command in the nation, only behind the queen and only behind the king. And so in the in the Persian Empire, the largest empire in the world at the time, they were number one. There were 2 Jews in the top 3. God uses what Satan meant for evil for good. Sounds like Joseph, doesn't it? What God meant for bad, what the devil meant for bad, God's done for good. But you see, this is an overreaching theme in the Bible. God has a plan, Satan tries to stop it. And God works through Satan's plan to bring out what he wants. Satan can't pull the wool over God's eyes, no matter how hard he tries. When you're facing an opponent that is omnipresent, literally everywhere at once, and omniscient, that knows everything at once, it's as bad as planning your war strategy and having the opposing general sit in and listen and give his opinion. God sets up in heaven and he laughs at Satan's attempt to thwart his plans. God's up in heaven saying, hey fellas, to the angels, watch this. Satan thinks he's going to get away with this, but watch what I'm about to do. God, over and over, uses Satan's plans to bring out good. In ways that we can't imagine, he makes wonderful things work out. From Genesis to Revelation, it's written in story after story of God crushing Satan's plans. Genesis chapter 3, God promised that a Savior would come from Adam's seed. So what does Satan do? He convinces Cain to kill his brother Abel to stop that promise. Doesn't work. Then Satan tries again in Genesis chapter 6 with Adam's line, trying to destroy it, and so God has to bring a flood. God later promises Abraham that his seed would bless the entire world. So there were attacks on Abraham's family in Genesis chapter 12, 20, and 50. You remember the destruction of the babes in Egypt by Pharaoh trying to stop Moses, which didn't. Pharaoh pursues the children of Israel to destroy them on the other side of the Red Sea, only to be destroyed himself. Canaan is filled after 400 years with giant tribes that the children of Israel are scared of. God promises later on that through David's house the Savior, the Messiah, would come. Saul tries to kill David. Joram tries to kill his brothers in 2 Chronicles chapter 21, but misses one. Azariah, they get raided. The entire royal family is destroyed and all killed. All the wealth taken away from them, except he makes it out alive. Athaliah tries to kill Joash, but fails, and he's on the run. Then you get to Luke, and David's line is used not from Solomon, but from Nathan. Every single time that Satan tries to do work, God intervenes. You get to the Bethlehem story, and Herod tries to kill all the babes to prevent Jesus being born, but they escape to Egypt. At the very end of Jesus' life, all through it, he tries to kill Jesus off. But what does Jesus do? He plays Satan's card and lays his life down on his time and his power. There is nothing that Satan can do. I want to take you back to the story of Esther one more time. Because there's something here that's going on that, yet again, you don't quite see. In Esther chapter 9, they defend themselves. They kill 500 in one day in one city and in 10 sons. And then she says, well, I want you to kill them again and hang them. She was actually talking about prophecy. We've mentioned over and over again, in the Hebrew mind, prophecy is patterns. Well, I want to ask you if you see a pattern in this story. October 16th, 1946. This was the New York Times. Goring ends his life by poison. 10 others hanged in Nuremberg prison for Nazi war crimes. Doomed men on the gallows pray for Germany. Hitler, in his last radio address, said the battle is between the Jews and the Jews alone. He was willing to hurt his war effort by sending trains to the death camps instead of the front lines, because he wanted to eradicate the Jews. Sounds similar to Haman, doesn't it? That's a small pattern, but it's a pattern. But let's go further. Newsweek, October 28, 1946. This was the quote. I couldn't find a picture of the actual paper, but here's the quote from it. Only Julius Stretcher went without dignity. He had to be pushed across the floor, wide-eyed and screaming, Heil Hitler! Mounting the steps, he cried out, and now I go to God. He stared at the witnesses facing the gallows and shouted, Purim Fest, 1946. And in parentheses, he says, Purim is a Jewish feast. Do you know what Purim celebrates? The 3 days where the Jews fasted for God to save them through Esther's hand. And they feast. Now, today, they still celebrate Purim because of Esther's occasion. And this man, this Nazi, going to be hung, screams out, Purim Fest, 1946. Well, that's interesting, but there's actually a little bit more. How many sons did Haman have? 10. How many were hung? 10. How were these hung? Well, how were these killed? Hung. But you know what's interesting? Notice, it says Goring ends his life by poison. So, apparently the Nazis had 11, but Haman only had 10. He only had 10 boys. He actually had one more girl. You know what she did? Surprise, surprise, she committed suicide too. What an interesting connection. It's further that when you go to the original text in the book of Esther, the year 5707 was the year of 1947. You go to the book of Esther, and you find in the text It is written in subscript and superscript, the year 5707. The very year these men would be hung for trying to do the same thing that Haman had done. As a matter of fact, what's very interesting, this headline is October 16th. That's when they were hung. In June of 1946, the trials at Nuremberg ended. But because they were delayed trying to get amnesty for these that were hung, the trial, the sentencing, didn't take place until October. Jewish New Year starts October 1st. Now, if they would have just ran through the trial, got them sentenced immediately, those guys would have been hung on 5706. But because people were trying to give amnesty to a bunch of Nazis that had just massacred and genocided a bunch of Jews, 2 months, 3 months later, they fall within the same prophecy that Esther gives all the way back in her book. There's a whole lot of coincidences there. But we know that God is working under the cover when we see coincidences. So how does this apply to us? The purpose for our life is to fit inside God's plan to bring him glory, right? That's what we do. Satan's first temptation was, did God really say? Because he wants to convince us that God didn't really say. Even though our world looks out like it's chaos, our lives may look like they're chaos, and things are happening that we don't understand and we don't know what's going on, I want to promise you, you don't have to fear because nothing's changed. God is still in control. Of every small circumstance in your life to every world leader around the world, God is still in control. Satan is in his last throes of desperation, but it will end as it began, with his failure. He can never defeat God because God, knowing all, has already defeated him. There is nothing Satan can strategize without God hearing. It was planned from the foundation of the world that victory would take place through Jesus, the Messiah. God's promise in Psalm chapter 2 was that he was going to put his son on the throne of Zion, and that's exactly what he will do. Fear nothing for your life. Fear nothing for Satan's abilities to work in your life. He is a defeated foe. You have victory because all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. Stand on the faith and know that God is always faithful, and that everything that you go through and that we are going through and about to go through, it's not changed an iota. God's looking down and laughing at all that Satan does because he's already won the battle. Would you stand with me? In closing, I want to tell you a short story and I'll be done. I get down to Tennessee and I meet this man named Sam. But there's a whole lot going on in this man's life, and it's just a wreck. His wife is literally so abusive that he has to get... Pause that. Hold on a second.